just wanted to start recording this conversation now. But first of all, I want to welcome you all to what is the first of the Phenomenology boot camp, okay? And what we are trying to accomplish here is I'm trying to do a condensed version, albeit robust, of a camp that I do 2 full days on site on campus. So please know that I'm going to go quite fast, given the time constraints and given the kind of material that I have to share and how we have to manage that system. So I want to thank, first of all, folks from IIM-Ahmedabad and IIM-Bangalore. These are FPM graduate students who are doing their doctorates that are joining us and have taken a tremendous amount of interest in doing the readings and getting back to me on the research questions, crafting all that. So I want to welcome you up on board. We also have in our midst some scholar practitioners such as Bhavini and others who may join a little later. These are folks that also are tangentially interested in phenomenology because they're doing qualitative research in media, etc., and they wanted to get a hang of what phenomenology really means. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go get started. And because we are a fairly small group right now, what I'd like to do is, and maybe I won't be able to go with each and every one of you, but if you just want to raise your hand and reflect on these questions. I know your name, you can skip the first one, but what drew you to this workshop? How do you define phenomenology, and what is meant by the essence of a phenomena? So let's get started. Anybody take a quick stab at that? Please raise your hand. Amog, go ahead.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
What drove me to this workshop is actually we had an introductory session on phenomenology in our research methods course, and I was intrigued by that session, and I developed more interest in this whole concept of phenomenology, and that's what drove me to this workshop.
Okay.
And how do you define phenomenology? I think it's describing the life world, as I just went through a few readings that you have shared.
Yeah.
So before conceptualizing, before theorizing, whatever we understand as it is experienced, so
nice.
that is phenomenology.
Okay.
And what do you mean by essence is so one of the readings I was going through, so they were describing what is parenting. So the essence of what actually means to be a parent. So I think that is the essence. The core of it. What is there in the core of it? The experience, what lies at the core of the phenomena, is the essence.
Okay.
Is what I feel.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. Good shot at it. Excellent. I like the fact that you picked up on the pre-reflective and pre-theoretical. That's a very, very key concept in phenomenology. Okay, so that's great. Anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Tanvi.
Basically, one of the readings and even general whatever we've read, like Amog, even I have gone through this research methods course. Basically, my simple understanding is that we are describing the human experience from whatever is basically every experience can be interpreted in a different way, and we are interpreting it from the participant's point of view, so it could have multiple levels of meaning.
Right.
And so what experience do I feel important enough to make it the core of my investigation? Something like that is what draws me towards phenomenology. I am not very sure on how to put my understanding of essence into words, so I'll not venture at that.
If you're not very sure, you're in a very good place. If you said, I'm sure, I would be
No.
really scared.
So, but yeah, it just seems interesting that, you know, because we are talking about human experience, the lived experience. That's
Yes.
something that brings me towards.
Excellent. That's a very, very good, very good stab at it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And let's see, Narayanan, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't raise my hand.
Okay, well, now you have to go. You have to say something.
Okay. So the reason I'm interested in this boot camp is because I did a master's in philosophy, and it was there that I was introduced to phenomenology.
Yes.
But the thing is, although I know a little bit about the philosophy behind phenomenology, I don't know a lot about the practice of it. So I'm hoping to figure out how to, put phenomenology into work here.
Aha, very, very nice. And this is the common strand, the common thread that runs through doing phenomenology, teaching phenomenology. Phenomenology you learn by not studying it per se, but actually by doing it. So what you just said is a very, very pivotal concept, is how do I translate what is so philosophical, what is so airy, what is so eclectic, what is so esoteric, and put a process into it, a methodology into it. Now, I just want to caution everybody that there are a lot of conflicting strands in phenomenology. Even the fathers of phenomenology oftentimes did not agree with each other, okay, on how phenomenology is processed, how it is understood, how it is felt, how it is made sense of. Broadly speaking, they had some common threads, but even they disagree. So please know that some of the concepts in your mind, you may feel muddled up, and you may say, oh my God, Dr. Bell said this, that is going to be like this, but actually now he's saying something quite different. So please know that I'm talking to you about shades of meaning, okay? The different flavors. So it's not one size fits all that you will learn about phenomenology. So thank you so much. Okay, let's see. Garima, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with the demarcations in the schools of phenomenology that you just mentioned.
Yes.
And I just want to say that phenomenology is basically study of a conscious experience. And the basic assumption behind it is that the reality lies with the subject who has lived that experience. So they can only tell the researcher better that what it is like to be to live that experience. So unlike the positivist who says that there is just one reality which stands there, and there is there is a duality between the observer and the observed, you just need to capture it. So they say that you need to come in contact with that participant and leave behind your interpretation of that event. That is called bracketing, like leaving your biases. And getting to know that from their lens, from their perspective. So that is what is capturing the essence from their perspective. So when you make the implicit explicit, so that is what.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. That's nice.
Thank
I like
you.
that. I like that very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else that wants to take a stab at this before we move on? That's fine. Tanvi, Narayanan has spoken, Garima has spoken. Okay, Garima, Narayanan, and Tanvi, if you could just lower your hands. Okay. Garima, did you want to say something more? Okay.
No, I just lowered my hand.
Oh, you lowered your hand. And Tanvi, if you could also lower your hand, please. Excellent. All right, so let's move on. That was a very, very good understanding that you have manifested about phenomenology. And as you'll see, that it has a lot of complexities, it has a lot of nuances, and that's what actually makes it both challenging, unpalatable, but also intriguing and enigmatic at the same time. All right. So what is the stream of consciousness? I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. We understand broadly the stream of consciousness because phenomenology is about understanding the essence of a lived experience and the life world of a participant who's actually living through that experience. All right. And what does phenomenology mean to a researcher? Of course, it is about doing phenomenology rather than just studying phenomenology. Yes, you can study, yes, you can read up about phenomenology, but real phenomenology gets enacted. The real phenomenology is manifested when you take the bull by the horns and actually immerse yourself in that life world of participants. Folks, this is the one basic difference, and you'll find many other differences between other forms of qualitative research and phenomenology. All right. So just keep that in mind as you look at this, because you don't want to confuse all and put all of the qualitative research methodologies into the phenomenology bucket. All right. Phenomenology is distinctly different. And ironically, though, most of the qualitative research methodologies have emerged from the human stream of consciousness. So phenomenology, in a manner of speaking, has been the mother. I don't think of the word phenomenology as paternal. I think of it as maternal, just my personal preference. It talks to me as a she, not a he. Okay. So is phenomenology an intellectual exercise or an emotional endeavor? I guess it's a bit of both. But if I were to really go into this and say what it is really about, because there's something that you'll hear in phenomenology, a term that's expressed very often. It's called pathos. You probably all have read of or heard about egos, pathos, and logos, right? Okay, the ethics of a thing, the logic of a thing, and pathos is your appeal to the softness, the tenderness, the humanness, the emotions. So rather than an intellectual exercise, because when I say intellectual, I mean you're putting a theoretical spin on it. And because phenomenology is far, far away from a theoretical spin, I would tend, and this is just my personal opinion, and you can disagree with me, I would tend to think of phenomenology as more of an emotional endeavor rather than an intellectual exercise. Again, intellect has to come in, but as you're doing phenomenology, you're going to be spending more time with the pathos, P-A-T-H-O-S. All right? All right, so natural science versus human science approach. I'm not going to go too much into this detail, but just let's read this together. A natural science approach would be steeped in academic psychology, which attempts to predict and control behavior in a laboratory setting. So experience is typically played down. When psychologists do this cognitive type stuff, they have participants in there that do all these experiments. The experience actually takes a back seat. They're not so concerned about that participant's experience, actual experience, as it is lived. On the other hand, a human science approach also investigates psychological phenomena, but by studying consciousness as it is experienced in oneself or in someone else. Okay, so one of the questions, as I was talking to people, and I asked you folks to send me your sample research questions. One of them really asked a question: can you not study one's own behavior? Okay, typically you can, all right, but when you're studying your own behavior, it's difficult for you to separate yourself from the phenomena, because if you become one with the phenomena, and it's hard to take a somewhat objective look at the phenomena as it reveals itself, as it shows itself. So even though technically speaking, you could study your own consciousness, you would probably find it hard to do a phenomenology on yourself. Not that it's not done. It has been done, but it's very, very hard to do it on yourself. Okay. All right. So father of phenomenology, you all know, was Edmund Husserl. Okay. Okay, just one second. I've gone a little too fast with this. Okay, father of phenomenology, Edmund Husserl. Phenomenology is a departure from behaviorism, cognitism, and Garima mentioned about the positivist approach. This is not a positivist approach. This is not about cognitivism. This is not about behaviorism. Those are all streams in psychology that are different. It's a return to things themselves as they are experienced. There's nothing more fundamental than experience itself. And this is a key. I want to spend just a couple of minutes on this. A return to the things as in themselves, okay? A thing that is experienced by itself. So phenomenology originally and essentially is a philosophical discipline and belongs to the human sciences tradition, as we were just talking about, okay? It's a method of abstemious reflection on the basic structures of lived experiences of human existence. You will hear this term abstemious, A-B-S-T-E-M-I-O-U-S. Abstemious means reflecting on experience that aims to abstain from theoretical, polemical, suppositional, and other intoxications. So in other words, if your mind is totally intoxicated with theories and suppositions and hypotheses about something, you're not going to be able to do the phenomenological method. And because it's a method, which means it's a way of approaching phenomena, it becomes so much more complex, because how can you on the one hand have a method and on the other hand have no crutches to that, as in the theories, as in the paradigmatic frameworks, as in these other materials. So how can you really do something when you have nothing to fall back upon? So you're on a limb, in a manner of speaking, because I think Garima mentioned about bracketing, which we are going to get to in a little bit, which is epoch, E-P-O-C-H-E, which is the concept of keeping aside, bracketing stuff that you feel would impinge on your phenomenological work, such as your theories, your paradigms, your perceptions, your biases, your prejudices. All of that you keep aside. Not that it is humanly possible to keep that aside all the time and not have it impact your research, but that is where the key is. It's a tension between all this stuff pouring out from you and trying to create an impact on your research. And on the other hand, you are going to keep them aside. You're going to keep them bracketed, because if we don't keep them bracketed, you are not doing phenomenology. You are doing some other form of inquiry. Okay, just keep that in mind. So experience isn't simply a response to the interacting variables, such as the environment, situations, etc., but a system of interrelated meanings, gestalt, a totality termed the life world. You're here, we talk about the life world, the lived experiences of people, streams of consciousness. So as you immerse yourself in the phenomenological method and phenomenological philosophy, you will hear these terms, these expressions come up again and again. And one of the things that I would highly suggest is that you study the lexicon of the methodology. It's very, very critical, not because you have to pepper your study or your dissertation with a lot of bombastic bad words, but whatever you share in your study, you should be really having a good understanding of. So try to understand what the life world means, tries to understand what embodied experience means, what's relatedness to one's personal world of experience, lived experience, and things of that nature. All right. So this is a nice piece that I got from Martin Heidegger, who, as you know, was the disciple of Husserl, of Edmund Husserl, Husserl was known as the father of phenomenology. Okay. Everything, when we talk about phenomenology, you cannot be speaking about phenomenology without mentioning Husserl, H-U-S-S-E-R-L. But Martin Heidegger broke away later from Husserl. Of course, he had some leanings with the Nazis at the time, and there was issues happening there in Germany, the one with the Nazi occupation and everything, and so they broke apart. But not purely because of that, also because of the fact that Martin Heidegger did not specifically agree with Husserl that all phenomenology is out there in the world. It's all transcendental. And we'll get to that in a second. But this is a nice piece. Anyone can achieve their fullest potential. Who are we? Who we are might be determined, but the path we follow is always of our own choosing. We should never allow our fears or the expectations of others to set the frontiers of our destiny. Your destiny can't be changed, but it can be challenged. Every man is born as many men and dies as a single one. This last sentence, every man is born as many men and dies as a single one. That actually speaks to the singularity of the experience in phenomenology. You will hear in phenomenology that you're steeped idiographically, I-D-O-G-R-A-P-H-I. Idiographically means the specificity of the experience of a person. You are not doing groups. You're not doing a phenomena concerning more than 1, 3, 4, 5, 10 individuals. You are focusing on the lived experiences of a single person, one person at a time. Okay? So let's look at the prominent phenomenologists. Transcendental phenomenology, Edmund Husserl described it as a descriptive, as a descriptive philosophy of pure essence. As you can well imagine, the philosophers were very idealistic, okay? And what could have been more idealistic than Edmund Husserl, because he looked at phenomenology as the it, as what shows itself to you, but he thought of that it as lying on the outside, that is all being manifested in the world outside, okay? So transcendental, the dictionary meaning of transcendental is actually spiritual. So he thought of it as, so when you look at the spiritual, you look at it as something idealistic that is not within your control. It's all playing itself out in the world, okay? And by contrast, his disciple, Martin Heidegger, thought of phenomenology as ontological. He said, how can you separate that experience that you're having in the world from the experience that you're having inside yourself? So while Husserl was not involved with the nature of being, Martin Heidegger brought it back in. And his method of ontology is about understanding the nature of being. Therefore, my friends, you will oftentimes see phenomenological research questions crafted with the following: what is it like to be? What is it like to be? How do you make sense of? So when you're asking that question, you're ontologically exploring. What does it mean for you to be immersed in such and such experience? Or what is it like to be gay? What is it like to be member of an LGBT community? What is it like to have cancer? What is it like to be an unwed mother? What is it like to have chronic lower back pain? Okay, so this things of that nature. So what is it like to be is an ontological research question. Existential phenomenology, you all have heard of Jean-Paul Sartre. His philosophy is a pure philosophy of realism, the concrete and ordinary existence. He did not even go as far as to say there's something spiritual, something beyond us. He said we live this phenomenology day in and day out in our own existence. So that's why the term existential phenomenology comes in. All right, it's a philosophy of realism, the concrete and ordinary existence. Hermeneutic means that you're reflecting on experience and you're aiming for discursive language and sensitive interpretive devices. Hermeneutic, just loosely speaking, means interpretation. So when you say hermeneutic phenomenology, you're really talking about interpretative. In the US, they use the word interpretive. In UK and in India, they say interpretative. They're really one and the same. So you're interpreting the experience. When we talk about the phenomenology that we are going to be discussing together in today and tomorrow is really hermeneutic phenomenology, okay? Then, of course, you have critical phenomenology. I just gave you the names of some of those key thinkers that you should be benchmarking. There are, of course, 25 other thinkers that have different streams of phenomenology, but I would definitely look up the transcendental phenomenology of Husserl, ontological phenomenology, the existential phenomenology of Sartre, critical phenomenology of Paul Ricoeur, and sociological phenomenology. Big aspect that some of you who come from a sociological background would be very intrigued by the work of Alfred Schutz. And of course, you have deconstruction phenomenology, Derrida. You'll hear the name of this philosopher, Derrida, a lot. Embodiment phenomenology, Merleau-Ponty. You'll hear this name also. So I've sort of like, out of the whole maze of philosophers, I've picked just a few. I'm not going to go, just in the interest of time, into each and every one, into any depth of this, their individual philosophies. This is for you to read up and study for yourself. Okay? So let's reflect. And then after that, I'm going to give you guys a chance to really say something about this. So let's reflect. Phenomenology insists that daffodils are indeed different for a wandering poet than they are for a hard-pressed horticulturalist. So the horticulturalist who deals with flowers, who deals with flora all the time, is looking at flowers, but the way a poet looks at a flower, the way a researcher may look at a phenomena, is different from that phenomena occurring in the life of everybody else. Okay, I may be passing by something and it is intriguing enough that I stop by and take a look at it, but then I pass by and not look at it again because I'm on autopilot. But for somebody who's a phenomenologist and somebody who's a researcher, that same thing that I am looking at may look different to that person. It may bring up wonder, a sense of wonder to you. So the individual is a conscious agent whose experience must be studied from the first person perspective. So just remember, it is from the first person perspective. And folks, a lot of times I've read phenomenologies, not a lot of times, but sometimes I've read phenomenologies where it jumped out at me that the entire study was written in the third person. Big mistake. Phenomenological studies are typically written in the first person. You, as a reflexive researcher, are sharing your experiences of interpreting a phenomena through the eyes of a participant who's also interpreting a phenomena. Okay? So it's called the double hermeneutic, and I'll talk about that a little later. Double hermeneutic is a researcher making sense of a phenomena, okay, that a participant is making sense of. So research is making sense of a phenomena that the participating is also looking at. So you are looking at the phenomena through different layers. And what about a person who's reading your study? So the reader of a study is making sense of the researcher, that is you who wrote the paper, who is making sense of the participant, that is your study participant, who is making sense of the phenomena. So you see where the phenomena is? The phenomena is out there. and the participant is making sense of the phenomena and sharing the narrative with you, the stories with you. You are listening to that. You are engaging in an in-depth, semi-structured interview schedule with that person to try to draw those stories out. So so this is what gives it the complexity, but also the richness and the enigma of research. So personal lived experience is therefore perspectival. So it is based on perspectives. It is your perspective of something, your interpretation of something, and it is the participant's interpretation of the phenomena. And now you might wonder that here's a contradiction. So if you're saying the researcher is interpreting the stories that are being told by the participant, then how can you interpret what is being shared with you if you keep all the theories, all the reflections, all your paradigmatic frameworks aside? If you bracket everything yourself, what do you really have left to make that interpretation? Okay, so just stay with that. All right. Phenomenology by itself, the philosophy, is neither inductive nor deductive. But when you do phenomenological analysis, the data analysis is an inductive process. When we get to that tomorrow, we'll talk about that, because tomorrow is dedicated to the methodology of doing the research, interpretive phenomenological analysis. So perspectival means from the perspective of different people. Idiographic means specifically as it relates to individual cases. Okay, you don't refer in phenomenology to case studies. It is not a case study method. So if you have got 14 participants, you don't say you have 14 case studies. You have one study, but you are individually, idiographically examining, exploring the life worlds, the lived experiences of individual participants. So the opposite of that, of course, is nomothetic, which you probably heard, absolute or generic. Okay, so you all know that, you're experienced researchers, and you've heard these expressions. So I'm not going to go into that. Consciousness is not just limited to awareness, but also pre-conscious and unconscious processes. So just to say that it's a stream of consciousness alone is not important, but to be able to really see that there could be pre-conscious material and unconscious material that also pours forth. So unlike other forms of ologies, such as psychology, anthropology, biology, phenomenology is not the study of a subject. Let me repeat that again. So psychology, PSY, ology is the study of, PSY is psychology, right? Anthropology is about the culture. So anthropology, all right? They could think of the other ethnomethodology, okay? However, if you look at phenomenology, the word phenomena is not a subject. It's not the study of a subject. A phenomena is not a subject. Just think about that in that way. So just a little distinction between those. Okay. It is a detailed description of experiences without recourse to explanation. I'm talking about phenomenology. It is a detailed description, an evocative description, okay, where you're evoking images, mental constructs in people without recourse to explaining, validating, taxonomizing, which means giving order to something, or reflective assumptions. They're carefully crafted descriptive and discursive accounts. Okay, I just put a little note there. I wanted to talk about this. It is a method for questioning, So again, phenomenology is a method for questioning, not a method for answering, discovering, or drawing determinate conclusions. So I chuckle here when I say this, because one of the faculty members that I ended up having on my dissertation committee asked me, after all those years of doing the research, she asked me, Anil, what did you find? So I looked at her, I said, what do you mean? So she said, what was the outcome? You spent all these years doing phenomenology. What was the outcome? What did you discover? What did you find? And that, my friends, is the antithesis to a phenomenological approach. So if you're entering phenomenology with the notion that you're going to make some spectacular discovery, you may actually get yourself caught short. So do not embark on a phenomenological inquiry because you're trying to discover something. You're trying to create this earth-shattering study out there. What you're really simply and elegantly doing is you're understanding the essence of an experience. And that is what is the nuance of phenomenology that a lot of people don't understand. So again, if you're going to be doing phenomenology, please make sure that you have on your dissertation committees somebody either internally who is steeped in phenomenology. By that, I don't mean a generalist, okay? Because you could have a lot of faculty members who are generalists. They understand action research, ethnography, narrative research, they understand quantitative, they understand all this. So they are, I hate to put it this way, the jack of all trades, okay? And they may be masters at some methodologies, but you really need somebody who's steeped in phenomenology, you understand the philosophy and the practice of phenomenology. And if you cannot find an internal person, you really have to have somebody who can be an external guide on your dissertation committee, okay? So with this, as in poetry, it is inappropriate to ask for a conclusion or a summary of a phenomenological study. To summarize a poem in order to present the result would be destroying the result, because the poem itself is the result. So when somebody asks you, what did you find? What is the summary of your study? Okay? It's like asking a poet, what was the outcome of your poetry? The entire phenomenological study and your reflexive accounts, your discursive accounts, your evocative descriptions are the outcome. So somebody who's steeped in phenomenology will never really ask you that question because they know phenomenology is a different approach. So with that, I just want to open the floor to you guys to share what so far has struck you as important, unimportant, whatever about phenomenology. And what is it that you would like to add for your colleagues here? So please raise your hand. Narayan, let's go to you first. Let me just 1 second. Let this. Narayan, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, unmute yourself and tell us what hits you here.
So, no, this is a doubt. And I think I've had this for a while now. I was just wondering what really is the difference between interpretation in phenomenology and let's say interpretation in general or in psychoanalysis or something like that.
Yeah. Excellent question. Did everybody hear that question? Could you repeat that question, sir?
Yeah, sorry. So I was wondering what the difference in interpretation as it is seen in phenomenology is versus interpretation in psychoanalysis.
What you made my day, my friend. What a brilliant question. This is at the heart of phenomenological philosophy. So before I give you what I think maybe the answer, you have to think about me as very tentative, but I like to be tentative. I like to be in that loose footing rather than a very solid footing. So I have some notions about that, but what about you guys? Can anybody take a stab? Let's see. How about Deepak?
Uh, that's a tough question given, I mean, I haven't thought about this. How do you define interpretation from two different point of view? So
Yes.
maybe the objective of the interpretation. So from a positivist perspective,
Mm-hmm.
the interpretation of the facts,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they are also looking at the facts only,
Mm-hmm.
but the interpretation is very definitive,
Yeah.
and it has to be generalizable.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe in a phenomenological perspective, or even in an interpretive perspective, that would not be the case, where you are trying to approach a generalizability.
Uh-huh.
So probably it goes to the ontological assumptions. I mean, is
Okay. Okay. All right. Great. Anybody else wants to take a stab at that? Garima, how about you?
Yeah, so I want to carry forward this point that objective of both psychoanalysis and phenomenology is different. So while psychoanalysis is a method of treatment of mental disorders in which you try to bring out the repressed and unconscious things, and you try to make them conscious to resolve a disorder or something that is troubling the patient, which was the main assumption behind, which was the main assumption through which Freud devised this method.
Okay.
Whereas phenomenology is basically it concerns with studying the conscious experience. So the objective is not to offer treatment, but to get to know, to understand the subjective experience of that phenomenon that we are studying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is how I see it.
Very, very good. Very good. Anybody else?
Can I?
Bhavani, you have your hand up. Go ahead. Bhavani?
Yes, I actually had my hand up to share the thing that hit me,
Okay.
and which I've been actually wanting to understand also, and the reason for joining this.
Okay. Go ahead.
That is what is the objective of doing phenomenological research in sense of the how can I apply it? So as a practitioner, for me it's like, okay, if I do ethnography research, I understand people and their culture, and then I can design something that can fit into that culture.
Yeah.
So similarly, I've been wondering how I can use phenomenology in the work that I do.
Okay.
But I'm not, so to answer the question that was raised, I am not really familiar with the interpretative difference between these two branches of study at all. It's new to me.
Great, great, great. But that's a good attempt. And so usually what happens is when people ask, in my workshops, when people ask me a question, I ask them to provide the answer to their own question. Okay, so who asked me that question? Narayanan, you asked us the question, what is the difference between interpretation or interpretative paradigm in other forms of research and phenomenological interpretation or hermeneutics in phenomenology? So why don't you try, just stretch your mind a little bit based on what we've been talking about in the last 13, 14 minutes or 20 minutes. Think about what jumps out at you about phenomenology that is not typically the same with, just take the example of psychoanalysis. Okay,
Right.
and I'm going to give you a hint. Psychoanalysis looks at behavior, looks at processes, looks at unconscious processes, covert processes through the lens of what?
Okay. Can I?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I think what you just said now and what Garima said a while ago makes sense. I mean, the motivations behind phenomenology and psychoanalysis are completely different. I get that. But at the same time, I think because psychoanalysis is also about uncovering the unconscious.
Yeah.
And phenomenology, the whole point of phenomenology is to make explicit what is implicit, right? So
Yes.
I was wondering whether how how far apart. I mean, I understand that the motivation in psychoanalysis is treatment, but couldn't you use phenomenology in psychoanalysis?
Now that's for a whole different topic. Okay,
Right,
so I don't want to digress into that. You and I can talk about that separately. That is making its presence felt in other branches, such as
Okay,
phenomena.
but apart from that, I think my doubt comes from the fact that, see, I haven't I've not been exposed to Heidegger or anybody other than Husserl, in fact.
Okay.
And it would seem from whatever I read in Husserl that interpretation itself is against the spirit of phenomenology, because according to the way Husserl puts it, phenomenology is a purely descriptive enterprise, right? So that's what kind of got me a little confused. So, but to be fair, I haven't read any of the hermeneutics people.
And what you're
very well.
referring to, sir, is, as per Husserl, it was a pre-predicated experience.
Exactly.
Before it has been thematized and named.
Yeah.
So he says the very act of naming a phenomena has already changed the phenomena.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So there's the major contradiction. All right.
Yeah.
So let me, unless anybody else, Deepak Mohan raised his hand. So Deepak, what do you think, my friend?
So I have a question in that direction only. So this was lingering on my mind for quite some time.
Okay.
So is it that as a researcher, I'm trying to bracket my concepts, my theories, and my feelings, but I'm privileging that of the participant?
You're very close. You're very close to answering Narayanan's question. Go ahead. Keep at it.
So what I was thinking was, like, if I'm actually trying to find the essence of the phenomena, that essence cannot exist outside the participants' concepts or theories. Otherwise, it is just facts. You're getting the facts and nothing else. So I mean, that's what my confusion is.
Okay, so that's great. You're in a very good place if you're confused. Okay. Because here's the thing. The difference between phenomenology and most other forms of research is that it studies the world as we ordinarily experience it before we think, conceptualize, abstract, or theorize it. It is about direct description of a lived experience as it appears to our consciousness, as it shows itself to us. Most social science and qualitative researchers embrace theory and tend to study behavior through the lenses of those theoretical constructs. Narayanan, does it answer your question? Narayanan.
Oh, sorry. I was on mute. Sorry.
Okay. So did that answer your question about how is the interpretative paradigm different in phenomenology than other forms of social science research? Because other forms of research, you're going to fall back on a lens. You're going to look at everything through the lens of a theoretical construct.
Right.
In phenomenology, you are doing interpretative analysis, but not through the lens of theories, suppositions, validations, hypotheses, taxonomy.
But practically speaking, I'm not convinced that one can do that, because
that is,
you're already embedded in a social world.
Yes, sir. And that is why, and I'm very glad you said that. That's the major contradiction. So the major debate, and the jury is still out on that. How can you, as a researcher, totally bracket your biases, your feelings, your thoughts, your constructs, paradigms, and look at the experience of a participant totally objectively? Okay.
Yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong, please. But I think doesn't Gadamer say that it's okay? You don't need to bracket it in. You don't need to have a really sterile mind in order to practice phenomenology. your historicity still.
Yes, sir. So in your study in chapter 5, see, you all know what chapter 5 is, right? You'll get to know chapter 5. Chapter 1 is your introduction. Chapter 2 is the literature review. Chapter 3 is the methodology method. Chapter 4 analysis. Chapter 5 is the findings results. Okay?
Yeah.
In a phenomenological study, typically chapter 5 will bring the reflexive experience of the researcher and narrate that there. So if you did the study, you spent 6 hours doing the study, you report it transparently, exactly what you went through, the challenges that you went through. Because the moment somebody is reading your study and finds that all your writing is hypothetical fundas, that, oh, this is that and this is this, they want to know when you engaged paradoxically in a bilateral way with the participant, what is it that you have to report?
Yeah.
What happened to you? Were you able to bracket all those assumptions? If yes, how? If no, what crept into your analysis? And how did that impact the way you made the study?
Okay.
So phenomenologies will address that right front and center in your study. Okay? It's called the reflexive experience. And if you happen to read in the box folder, I think I've uploaded my entire dissertation. It's all a phenomenological study of lived experience at the edge of certitude and incertitude. Go to chapter 5 and read up. And you'll see that I've narrated my own shortcomings. Okay? And I've narrated that in other words, in a way I'm saying, if I were to do this all over again, I would have looked at it differently.
Okay.
And I have had more accolades, more comments, and more feedback on that one piece than my entire study.
Oh, okay.
From phenomenologists who were really happy that I was able to share with the academic community what it is that I experienced while doing phenomenology.
Okay.
All right. So these are some of the contradictions that run through phenomenology. All right.
Right.
So okay. So but on that note, so again, what we're trying to do is to capture the experience of individuals, and we have already discussed that. Well, we have discussed, as in poetry, it is appropriate, an attempt to capture experience in process as lived through descriptive analysis. So phenomenology is a descriptive, evocative, discursive writing. And let me share something with you, which a lot of you probably may find very somewhat disconcerting, somewhat perplexing. About 70% of a phenomenological study is the writing piece. Okay? And you might say, whoa, what about the data collection? What about all the interviews I did? What about all the analysis I did? All the transcripts I read? All the divergences, convergences, the themes and whatnot? What about that? Yeah, all that is important. But hermeneutic phenomenology is in the writing of the phenomenology. So as you write it, that's where your phenomenological mind, your phenomenological lens, you're writing it through that. It comes through. And it's a method of learning about another person by listening to their descriptions, free of our preconceptions and interference, bracketing or preconceived notions. Again, we've already discussed how that notion itself can be challenged, and it is challenged in the literature, that you cannot totally bracket your preconceived notions. Okay, even when you're doing in-depth, semi-structured interviews. So how can you engage with a participant paradoxically in a bilateral way and not have your biases, your prejudices enter that interview? Okay, the researcher assumes an active role and voice. Does anybody want to share anything on this before we move on? Anukriti, go ahead.
Yes, sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So the only question I had, and it's more of a general inquiry that I've been doing since I also spoke to you about this via email. So
Yes.
we see that we are not examining through the lenses of theory, but we are examining through doing,
Yes.
or knowing through doing.
Yes.
The issue I had with this is that as researchers, we are encouraged to think about theory building,
Yes.
about having a construct, and about having that argument
Yes.
building reflect in our writing as well.
Right.
So it becomes very difficult to not think about theorizing. Even when you are experiencing, even while you are in an interview with somebody, it just keeps occurring to you all the time, and you cannot help but link it to the different theoretical underpinnings and different theories that you've read. So
Right.
do you have to avoid those, and would you say that those are unwelcome?
Well, you have to keep as open a mind as possible. As a phenomenologist, you have to be doing this with a very, very open mind, open as an innocent, unfettered mind. You're not looking at, there has to be a childlike wonder, childlike enthusiasm about doing phenomenology. Okay? Because the moment you start to bring all of that stuff to bear, you cannot do, because yes, on the one hand, your coursework is teaching you about theorizing and about putting a spin on it and looking at it through, and all that's great, but that's for a different kind of research methodology.
Okay.
When you're doing phenomenology, you are bracketing, you're reducing, and we'll talk about reduction in a minute, a phenomenological reduction. Okay, how do you take those? How do you brush off? There's a concept called brushing off in phenomenology. You brush off stuff because you're trying to reveal something, or you're trying to allow something to reveal itself to you. Okay?
Right.
And
right.
that something could be something so deeply phenomenological. It could be a phenomena. It could be the lived experiences, because you cannot separate lived experiences from that phenomena. So sometimes the phenomena by itself is a lived experience. Sometimes the phenomena is being manifested through the lived experiences of a participant as the participant is sharing about that phenomena. So somebody that's gay is talking about how it is to be gay in a largely straight society. Okay? So you see where I'm going with this? You really have to allow your mind to be unfettered, to be unencumbered by this.
Okay.
And is it, and it may sound idealistic, because in reality, you're not going to be able to do that. But even if you come close to consciously suspending the judgment, consciously suspending the defensiveness, suspending your own counter-transferences to what is happening. I'm just using a psychoanalytic term there. Because you're looking at this with the eyes of a child. Okay? You're not testing hypotheses. You're not using a theoretical model, right? Just look at the screen, practice elements. Okay. You're looking at the primacy of the life world. Means that our approach to understanding is pre-theoretical and pre-reflective. So pre-reflective does not mean that something that you're looking at has not been reflected upon at all. It just means that when you take it upon yourself and start to reflect on that, you've already changed it because now you're reflecting on it. So in that sense, it is pre-reflective prior to when you started to reflect on it. What was it about that showed itself to you? Okay, that's why the term pre-reflective comes. Try to come as close as you can to understanding the experiences being lived. There is no claim that phenomenological results are predictive or replicable. You will hear the terms predictive and replicable in other forms of positivist research or even some social science research. We might hear the expression predictive or replicable, but not in phenomenology. Does that clarify it for you?
Yes, it does, to quite an extent, yes.
Okay, great. Anybody else? So Garima, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so you mentioned that we need to have a childlike approach while studying a phenomenon.
Yes.
So that I am clear that we need to guard ourselves against our preconceived notions and beliefs.
Yeah.
But then what about the emotions that we feel towards that person? So a sense of empathy that we feel, and you feel for the person, you feel connected to the person. So what if that you drags you away? And so is it welcome in a phenomenological approach? And if
Okay.
not, then how to guard ourselves?
It's a very wonderful question, and I'm going to open it up to the others to answer this question. So, did everybody hear what she just said? That what happens if you're feeling emotionally connected to that person, to that participant?
Dr. Bahal, this is Deepak. So, I have written a question in the chat. I think it's kind of similar. Taking the hint from probably where you said the 5th section of your thesis.
Yes.
So, while taking interviews, that's like once you're bracketing, but in reality, you are also going through emotions and your feelings.
Right.
So, probably you keep 2 separate journals where in one you write what you after you bracket things, and
Yes.
in the other what you experience or the emotions that you go through.
Yeah.
Does that so am I getting it correct?
Okay.
About the 5th section where you said about that.
Okay. So that was Anukriti. You said that, right? You just shared that, correct? Right, with us, right?
Sorry, which one? The question that is written in the chat, that was asked by Deepak, I think.
No, but Deepak, no, we're talking about the emotions part.
No, that was Garima.
Garima, I'm sorry. I got confused.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Garima, so you ask a very, very important question there, because it is very natural sometimes to have that attraction, have that pull, have that emotional cathexis to somebody. And how do you then allow yourself? But that is the role of you have to be in role, okay, as a researcher.
Yeah.
You have to know what are you there for. You are not there to stand. Now I want to talk about this. You're not there to stand apart from the participant as though this doesn't affect you, because that would be a positivist approach. Okay,
Yeah.
it would be almost like an ethnographer getting embedded in a system, going native in a system, where even though the researcher is mingling with people there, but trying to take an objective approach, looking from the outside in, right?
Yeah.
So even though in this you're looking from the outside in, you're also inside that system. So what do? It's a dilemma.
Yeah.
How do you? So if you feel that as you're doing the analysis, as you collect all the data, you're bringing the data back, you're transcribing it yourself, you're analyzing, you've got 250 pages of double spaced all over your walls. Now you're trying to find some themes and all that. You are required to, I shouldn't say required, you're expected in phenomenology to be able to state what happened to you. Okay, in your chapter 5, it could be a beautiful section that these are some of the feelings that came, and you were conflicted. You had a tension between totally bracketing it. Okay, and so when you are aware of what's happening and you're able to evocatively, descriptively describe that in your study, that's about all you can really do, right? You cannot do more than that. More than that, you can't do. You're a human being. Okay? So you are saying that I try to remain as objective as possible. And then the problem, and then we'll talk tomorrow about data analysis and everything else, and how all of that stuff comes into the analysis, and how much of it you are analyzing through your own perspectives, and how much of it actually you're analyzing based on what they said. The rule of thumb is your analysis. It's, remember, this is your study, but who are you studying? You're studying the participants, and what are the participants reflecting on a phenomena, correct? It's not about you. Even though this is your dissertation, it's your life, it's your PhD, this is not about you guys. This is about them. And that's why phenomenological studies are written in the first person, because you cannot hide there. If you use third person, you can hide behind objectivity.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what transpired. The researcher feels, the moment I read that in a study, the researcher felt that this happened. I'm saying this person doesn't understand the essence of phenomenology.
Okay.
Okay.
So this immersion at such a deep level is required. It's actually welcome
Yes,
in
of
such
course it
researches.
is. Of course it
Yeah.
is. Of
Okay.
course it is, because you're immersing yourself in the life world of that person.
Of the participant.
And here I want to just share really quickly, guys. When I mentioned the word native in one of my workshops, a young lady, very enthusiastic, jumped up and said, no, what you're not, this is not phenomenology, this is ethnography. And I said, why do you think so? Well, sir, because you used the word native. So I said, I am saying going native from the standpoint of not being embedded there, which you would be doing if you were an ethnographer, because as an ethnographer, you're embedded there for not just 90 minutes of the interview, you're embedded there in the system. So she fought me out of that, and I want to share with you, if there's one thing you take away from our sessions and about phenomenology, I'm going to share this $1 million thing with you. Hold on lightly. Hold on lightly. Okay? Don't hold on to something so tight that you find it hard to let go. Because then you're bringing your preconceived notions, ideas, thoughts. You are not being open to whatever is coming, however the phenomena is going to show itself. You're so clouded by your own stuff. Okay, so bracketing is suspending or setting aside our biases, everyday assumptions, understandings. Epoch, we've already talked about. The first opening is a direct experience. All these concepts I would like you to look at. We are not going to have the time to go through each of them, but I will definitely upload this to the box folder, guys. This PowerPoint, so you can look at that and use it as you will, and whatever items we couldn't come. Because remember, this PowerPoint is really for 2 in-depth days on site on campus. Okay, when we discuss each and every one of those items and open it up to reflection, we won't have that kind of time because I have to go into the next segment here. Okay, paradoxically bilateral, this is something that you use in phenomenology, but also generally speaking in qualitative research. You challenge the imbalance of the researcher-participant relationship. They are dominant, but also submissive. They're assertive and non-assertive, powerful and powerless. So as a researcher, you may sometimes feel very empowered, but you also may feel totally powerless. You feel that this whole interview is going out of bounds. It's going off tracks. It's not on the rail. You have to bring it back to the rails, but not in a way that is intrusive to the participant, but to steer it back, because what is your purpose? Your purpose is to collect rich data, right? So the phenomenological method of research honors a paradoxically bilateral relationship between the researcher and the participant. Phenomenological reduction is an attempt to suspend the observer's viewpoint, which we've been talking about. It's hearing another person's reality and focusing on the central, dominant, or recurring themes which represent the essential qualities or meanings of that person's experience. So you hear the term epoch, E-P-O-C-H-E, which is bracketing. And so epoch and bracketing are really part of the process of phenomenological reduction. Phenomenological reduction comes into play when you actually starts even in the data collection process, because you're making notes, you're making those themes, you're doing the color coding as you're collecting the data, depending on how you're doing it. Are you doing face-to-face? Are you doing virtually? All my interviews were done via video conferencing, okay, on the GoToMeeting platform. So I kept the consistency there. But if you're doing face-to-face, you're making notes, you're doing all of that stuff. So that is part of phenomenological reduction. Even as you're doing it, the heuristic epoch reduction, there are epoch reduction methods. there you'll hear a term, it's called the sense of wonder in phenomenology. What is that wonder? Is the wonderment that you think of, wonderful? A sense of wonder is something that grabs you, something that, you know, your mouth hangs. You feel, oh my God, this is something that strikes me, okay, as very, very critical. Okay, I want to look at this more. And you can go through a whole lifetime and not have that happen to you, but if it happens to you, you'll know it when it does happen to you. So it's kind of like I use a lot of work by Max van Manen. I'd also shared a couple of papers with you from Max van Manen. His Phenomenology of Practice is a wonderful book that you should all have in your library at school. It's just called Phenomenology of Practice, Meaning-Giving Methods in Phenomenological Research and Writing by Max van Manen. So the heuristic epoch reduction awakens a profound sense of wonder. Okay, the wonder that he's talking about is a different kind of wonderment than the wonder that you're really used to thinking about. So when you're struck by the wonder, what is it that you're reducing? What is it you're bracketing? Okay, so we can talk about that. In that, the hermeneutic epoch reduction brackets all interpretation and focuses on openness. Okay, so because hermeneutic is interpretation, it brackets all your interpretation and focuses on the openness. So in heuristic epoch reduction, you're bracketing all that and focusing on the wonder that grabs you. In hermeneutic epoch reduction, you're bracketing all the interpretations. In experiential epoch reduction, you're bracketing theories or theoretical meanings. The methodological epoch reduction, you're bracketing all conventional techniques. And there are many other bracketing and reduction methods, which you can read up on your own, and which I actually go in depth when I do a face-to-face workshop. So phenomenology attempts to gain access to the primordial, which is antique, old, ancient, pre-reflective, and originary, which means original, structures of phenomena without theorizing, explicating, validating, refuting, taxonomizing, or hypothesizing. You will never use the word hypothesis in phenomenology. There is nothing hypothetical in phenomenology. Your mind must become a thoroughfare for a retrospective account of what it was to have lived the experience. So remember, phenomenologies are a retrospective account. You don't ask a person, what is it that you're going through right now? Because remember, it is a pre-reflective account. So you're going back, you ask a question, what was it like to have been? Or even if you ask a question, what is it like to be in a state of negative capability? When the person answers that in the interview, the person is reflecting on past experiences. As a matter of fact, you're encouraging the person to think about the past. They're called retrospective experiences. So that experience need not be something extraordinary for it to be classified a phenomenon. You can find wonder in the most ordinary life experiences. You're walking down a path in a wooded area of a forest, and you're walking alone, you're alone with your thoughts, and suddenly you become aware consciously of leaves crackling under leaves and twigs crackling under your feet as you walk on them. Okay. And your mind gets transported to 20, 15, 20, 30 years ago, when as a child you used to walk in the forest with your mom or your dad, who used to take you walk for a forest. Something triggers in you, something conjures up in you, and that becomes a phenomena for you. Okay? So, and that I'm going to actually go into something that I'm going to talk about with you guys. It's based on my research study, and which I think you'll find extremely germane to social science research, and it's called negative capability. I'm just going to go there for a second. Before I do that, I wanted to ask, you folks, if anybody has heard of negative capability before. Could you raise your hand if you've heard of negative capability? Before you heard it from me. Nobody, I guess, right? So nobody has heard of negative capability. Or wait, Narayanan has, right? Go ahead, Narayanan.
I mean, I have heard of it.
Mm-hmm. So in what context did you hear of it?
I don't remember really, but and also I read it in your paper today.
No,
but,
I was meaning prior to my sharing that with you. Had you had it?
I'd read something very similar earlier, but I don't recollect well. I mean,
Okay. So this is not uncommon. This is not uncommon. When I ask people, nobody has heard about negative capability. It sounds so weird. It sounds like an oxymoron because the words negative and capability cancel each other out, right? But that's the nature of dialectics, right? It's the tension of opposites. So negative capability, and I'm going to go to this. Here's the guy, John Keats, a romantic, English romantic poet back in 1817, wrote a letter to his brothers in which he was making an analogy with Shakespearean ability to stay with sensation, stay with mysteries, doubts, and uncertainty. All right. And he lived to be only 23 or I think about 24 when he died. So in that short lifetime, he's considered one of the most famous English romantic poets of that era. Okay, and paralleled only to like William Shakespeare. So you can imagine in that short lifespan what he did. So definition of negative capability, at once it struck me what quality went to form a man of achievement, especially in literature, and which Shakespeare possessed so enormously. I mean, negative capability, that is when a man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact. Why am I sharing this with you? Because one of the unintended consequences of doing research is that you suddenly start to find that you are working on a concept, you're working on a topic that is so germane to the work that you do. And actually, paradoxically, if you look at it, you are sometimes drawn to something because you're intrigued by it, because it helps you to be who you are. Okay? So even on a phenomenological basis, if you look at it, it helps you become more of who you are. So I figured that phenomenology was one, or negative capability was a construct that I thought would be very germane to social science researchers, and you'll find out in a second why. So the origin of negative capability, coined by the famous English romantic poet in 1817, it's a peculiar state in which a person is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. So when you're doing qualitative research, especially the kind of investigative, exploratory type of research that you're going to be doing in phenomenology, and also other qualitative approaches, you have to be comfortable with uncertainty, mysteries, and doubts. Because if you're not, you are using theoretical constructs and other lenses paradigmatically as a crutch. So you're not allowing the natural research process to unfold. So it suggests a peculiarly human capacity for containment, and I'm sure you've all heard the expression containment, to live with and tolerate ambiguity and paradox and remain content with half knowledge. So you might say, well, how many times have you been in an organization where your leader or your boss rewarded you for half knowledge because he asked you, well, what can you say about this? And I say, I can only say half of that. You don't get an applause because that is not regarded as really useful in organization. You are actually expected to know more than less. Okay? So to tolerate anxiety and fear, to stay in uncertainty in order to allow for new thoughts and perceptions to appear. engage in a non-defensive way with change without being overwhelmed by the ever-present pressure to react. I'm sure you've all heard of the expression Anekantavada. It's a Jainism doctrine which is about pluralism and multiplicity of viewpoints, right? So negative capability from the standpoint of Anekantavada is a sublime expression of supreme empathy, okay? And empathy is the capacity for participant, and listen to this second piece carefully and read it. And empathy is the capacity for participating in experiencing and understanding another's feelings or ideas. It's a creative tool to help us understand each other, understand different points of view or different cultures so that we might be able to express them. Okay? Being able to see a thing from another's point of view and to apply an open, imaginative creativity are both critical, poetical methods to also resolve conflicts. Okay? So negative and positive, people ask, what is positive? Positive is how much we do know, how much we can get done, and how quickly we can arrive at decisions. Begins with an already full plate and hidden agendas. Negative is how much we don't know. So folks, the word negative is not in the classical negative sense, which is the opposite of positive. Negative in the expression negative capability, how Keats constructed it, was how much we don't know, starting with an empty space, resisting the urge to disperse into action when the anxiety and uncertainty are high, to stay comfortable with not knowing and not doing. Okay, so you probably all seen this at some point or the other. What do you see? All right. So what you see is depending upon your own perspective. I might see a goblet, a black goblet. I might see two faces looking at each other. Okay. But just think about this. The goblet, if you think of the goblet as the phenomena, as something that's trying to show itself to you, do you think the goblet would show itself to you if I painted the entire white background in black? I'm sure you all will agree that that whiteness is what brings the object out, brings it into focus. So what is the whiteness that we talk about in phenomenology? I want to open that out to you guys. Raise your hand. What is the whiteness that we talk about? This empty space, emptiness that we talk about as we've been discussing phenomenology. Okay, go ahead, Anukriti.
Is this what we mean when we say bracketing? Because in a way, the white space is sort of giving a shape to the goblet. I don't know. I'm just working on a hunch.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? So, what does the white space contain? I mean, well, you could say, hey, how can it contain something? It doesn't contain anything. It's nothing, right? But isn't nothing also something? So give it a thought.
Yeah, so that is negativity, I guess, because that.
Yes. So Garima, what do you think?
So this figure, as it is based on Gestalt's principle of figure ground, so that means the white thing provides a background for us to be able to perceive the figure.
Yes.
Likewise, our own theories, paradigms, preconceived notions and beliefs, they provide us a foundation, a background for us to be able to see a reality.
Right.
So now, so epoch, or I am focusing my attention on this figure, and I am removing all the things like these, the background perspectives or external constraints aside, so that I can focus on that figure to capture the essence. So,
right.
So when
right, go ahead.
We engage in phenomenological reduction. That is what I see it.
Very beautiful, beautiful. I love that. I love that. The paradigms, the biases, the prejudice, everything.
Thank you.
It's serving a dual purpose. While on the one hand, it is giving shape to the goblet. On the other hand, it is introducing our own paradigms, our own biases, our own theories into it, because there is also, other than the goblet, there are also two faces. So sometimes when I look at it, it appears as a goblet. Sometimes I look at it, it appears as two faces. But what if I were to reverse this, turn it on its belly? Maybe there's something new that might come out, right? So if you already fill that white space with our paradigms, our notions and theories and hypotheses, you're not going to be able to see the phenomena for what it is. Okay?
Yeah.
Right? Anybody else? Okay. So I guess we can move forward. Integrating negative and positive space in research. Okay. You cannot exercise negative capability at the cost of positive capability. Breakthroughs in understanding occur at the edge of knowing and not knowing. Okay. Which you all know. Around every situation or presenting problem lies an empty space. This is the space that I was talking in the previous slide. The out of awareness issues, unconscious assumptions, unspoken fantasies. The key is to resist the pressure to fill that space with our own assumptions. Perhaps one of the most difficult temptations to resist in consulting research engagements as well as in research. Okay? So negative and positive leadership, I do this also with leadership studies. Positive leadership is about filling the space with what you know. Negative leadership starts with the premise that, like the submerged iceberg, there is much that we don't know about a situation. It starts with an empty slate, a transitional space which makes room for feelings and emotions, one's own and others. Okay. There is a institutional discourse in research. So low status is waiting, patience, passivity, observing, imagination, detachment, disinterest, trust, humility, and empty. These are accorded typically low status, especially in organizations. Even in academia, if you continue to say, hey, I'm waiting, I'm patiently, I just want to be passive, I'm just going to observe, I'm going to imagine, I'm going to detach myself from all this, it's not going to fly for too long. Before you know it, your chairperson is going to come and say, hey, what's going on? Are you there with us? And plus you have benchmarks, I know, at IIM that you have to meet every step of the way to continue with the FPM status. So high status is action, doing, knowing, leading, directing, impatience, deadlines, assuming, and filling. It's just the nature of the beast. We accord a high status to people who act, do, know, lead, okay, because it makes us feel that these people are doing something valid. I'm just going to flip through this. So through the exercise of negative capability, the leader becomes like the strings of a lyre, an instrument not for music or poetry, but for organizational inquiry, learning, and creativity. Organization research too, as part of that. I'm going to skip through some slides. I'm going to skip because they're not germane to us here. I'm going to go through some of the other slides that are important. Emotions that fill. Okay, so challenges in practicing negative capability. Holding, containing, creating space for others, accepting ignorance of self and others. This self-ignorance is a very huge concept. And if you read my study, my research doctoral study, I've talked about on the very first page, I think, the first or second page of my introduction, talk about unlearned and learned ignorance. Okay, you may want to read that concept. It's very, very germane to the whole area of research. You want to remain at times comfortable with your own ignorance. with your own not knowing, okay? And difficulty with containing systemic pressure. Deepak raised his hand. Deepak, do you want to say something? Go ahead, Deepak. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Deepak.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, okay.
So I typed in the question also. So while we are discussing this negative thing, and when we are saying that all that we do is actually bracket our experiences, and we treat each phenomena as a unique thing. So am I assuming is it right that whatever knowledge has been gained by me or by maybe the whole community of researchers, they've tried to explain certain phenomena that cannot be used in this research? It becomes irrelevant.
Okay, can you rephrase that for me? Yeah.
So while, because there is a phenomena which I'm trying to probably understand, that is my purpose.
Yes.
But for that understanding, I'm saying that if it is unique and I cannot bring in any experiences or any concepts, then all the knowledge that has been gained till now about similar phenomena,
right,
that becomes irrelevant, or that is actually not applicable to this phenomena.
Right. So whose research is it?
Yeah, so maybe my previous research and maybe the community of researchers that I work with.
Okay, so who are you researching there?
I'm researching the phenomena.
Okay.
And
wait. Let me ask you. Let me finish my question. You're researching the phenomena. Through whose lens are you researching it?
So the person who is describing the phenomena for me, the participant.
So you see the participant.
Yes.
So your lens, my friend, is secondary.
Yes.
You are only absorbing that, and later you'll try to make sense of that. But it's your study. It's your study, but it's actually their study. It's the study of the participant. So if you start to read the participant stories, narratives, or whatever through your own lenses, you're defeating the entire purpose of doing phenomenology. I know this is a difficult concept to grasp, because on the one hand, how can you make sense of those unless you're able to look at them objectively, right?
Not necessarily objectively, but yeah, I mean, I can distance myself from that thing for some time, but if I totally distance myself, then what use it is my past experiences. What use are they?
Okay, excellent. So Narayanan has something to say. Go ahead, Narayanan.
Yeah, hi. So this is just a response to Deepak.
Yes.
So if I understood his question correctly, he's saying that because phenomenology is an idiographic exercise, whatever previous researchers have come up with in their own phenomenological inquiries is not relevant. But so what I think the answer to that would be, when Husserl conceived of phenomenology as a way of approaching knowledge itself, I think he thought of it as a collaborative exercise, right? So there are multiple perspectives that you can have about the same phenomenon, and all of this adds up. So I think the most basic idea of phenomenology is, when I read a phenomenological description, if it doesn't make sense to me, then there is something maybe that you need to add to it or remove from it. If it makes intuitive sense to you, then it's a good description. I think
excellent.
That's the way I understand.
Beautiful. I applaud you for saying that. Wonderful. Because what you said, the intuitive, Husserl was big into the intuitive side.
Right.
Okay. What is it that it's showing itself to you from the external world? Because he was an idealist. He said there is something that's going to reveal itself to you. There's something there, okay? And of course, Deepak has his own perspective to that. I'm sure if I ask somebody else, that somebody else will have her or his own perspective to that. So it is about multiplicity. That's why I was talking about Anekantavada. the pluralism and the multiplicity of viewpoints, okay? Because you're bringing in so many different perspectives, so many different layers, and you're through a process of adding feathers to the bird. Sometimes you're winnowing, removing the shaft from the grain, right?
Right.
In order to, you're brushing off something you're trying to reveal, but as I once wrote to you in my email log, it can be a very frustrating process, because through this whole process that you are undertaking, something may or may not reveal itself to you, or something that reveals itself may be different from what you thought would reveal itself. And that's why the childlike innocence, Garima, is very, very important, and Anukriti. This is very, very important, the childlike enthusiasm. Because children don't get frazzled if something else pops up. As a matter of fact, they're happy. You know? So if you keep that childlike innocence in phenomenology, you're not going to get frustrated with what it is. Because if you start with the notion that there's something is going to reveal itself, and here is the shape of the something, here is the goblet that's going to come out, my friends, you're not doing phenomenology. Because if you read my study, and I keep saying that because it's a very personal thing to me, you read my study, you'll see that I've narrated that what I was trying to research, okay, and what ended up through my research, there was a dichotomy there. Now, somebody could have said to me, you failed in your phenomenology. But when I look at the spirit of phenomenology, it's about allowing something to reveal itself to you, whatever that something is. Okay? And it's phenomenology, we are not putting tabs on that something, that here is what has to come out. You have to allow itself to show itself. All right? So, anybody else wants to add this to this? Okay, I guess not. So let me just move forward. In the current context of organizational and radical uncertainty, the ability to lead demands precisely the capacity to tolerate ambiguity, uncertainty, and complexity in the present moment, which is what we refer to as negative capability. Some of these slides, you'll see the word leader there rather than researcher. Researchers are also, in a manner of speaking, self-leading. They're part of doing some leaders. There will be leaders at some point. There'll be academic leaders. There might be organizational leaders. So oftentimes I talk about both when there is time available to talk about. Today we don't have that kind of time. I'm just going to talk about one of the other concepts that you can read up more on, that Melanie Klein's developmental position, paranoid schizoid position, which is characterized by impatience, impulsiveness, lack of containment, and excessive splitting and fragmentation, or the depressive position characterized by patience, contained responses, composure, thoughtfulness, wholeness, humility, and authenticity. To me, the depressive position is a very, very important position to be held as a researcher, especially when you're doing phenomenological research. Not that the paranoid schizoid position is not important. That gives the fire, that gives the energy to your work. Whereas the depressive position gives the reflective ability, the praxis to your work, the thinking, the non-defensiveness with which you work with your superiors or work with your faculty, advisors, mentors. So both are important in research. I'm going to skip through some of the slides. I'm going to skip through this one. The good and bad breast is again a Kleinian construct. You can read up on that, on Melanie Klein's in a paranoid schizoid stage of development. The ability to hold together the good and bad breasts in one place is greatly diminished. There's an illusion that both cannot exist. And by this, think of polarized thinking. When people only see black or white, they cannot see the gray, okay? They cannot hold the good and the bad together. They cannot hold the good sides and the bad sides of something together. They are polarized. They say, hey, you're either in my life or you're out of my life. I can't deal with you. In a depressive stage of development, a painful realization occurs that with the good breast also lies the bad breast. For both to coexist, a state of ambivalence and ambiguity must be paradoxically worked through. Okay, somewhat psychoanalytic, this construct, but I thought I'd share this with you for something for you to glean, not just from the standpoint of phenomenology, but also from the standpoint of research in general and your studies through the FPM program. Integration versus splitting, I'm going to split over that. I'm going to split through this. I'm going to go real fast on this. I'm going to go through this. Okay, so I just want to talk about the third position. So when you're not polarized, when you're not on either ends of the continuum, there is a third position that you can take, and which is the researcher's standpoint. The third position is not a frozen space where the researcher is so immobilized and or torn between action and reflection that neither seems doable or viable. So you don't want to be frozen either. In the third position, it is the capacity to summon and mobilize adaptive aspects of the paranoid schizoid position, which I was talking about: the fire, the passion, the virility, strength, conviction, vision, and aggression, while at the same time exercise the maturity as a researcher to refrain, restrain, contain, and hold aspects which are so characteristic of the depressive position. Okay. Now remember, a negative capability is not a phenomenology concept, okay? Even though it shares a lot of, because one of the things that Keats was a great existential phenomenological poet. But I saw some parallels, I saw some imagery there, I saw some constructs there in negative capability that I wanted to share with you. So maybe it'll help you tomorrow as we get placed to do the turnkey process, interpretative phenomenological analysis, and also talk about your research questions in depth. That's where some of these issues will come through for you. Okay, so I'm not going to go into that. Just give me a second. Okay, two themes that are prevalent in the literature on research and practice. Very important. Either you're here planning for the future, or you're here learning from the past. Attention needs to be given to a third element that is not well represented in the literature today. And that is the researcher's capacity to think in the present moment. Folks, one of the hardest things we'll ever do is to stay in the present. When our anxieties are high, when you are very under pressures and deadlines and whatnot, you either flee into the future or you regress to the past. It's hard to stay in the present moment. Okay, the researcher's capacity to think of it contained is egg, is contained fully. Uncontained is a broken egg, right? What does containment mean to you? It's a tolerance for ambiguity, resistance to impulse to rescue, unknowing the unknown. I'm going to skip through all that just in the interest of times. This is not important right now. Okay, guys, this one piece really, really hits home as imagery. Qualitative research is a tempest. Okay. There is a lot of messiness in qualitative research. There is no certainties. You don't know, you're starting here today and where you're going to end up. Okay. So you're almost like riding a stallion into the sunset, not knowing where the heck you're going to end up. So in that sense, qualitative research is a tempest. Okay. There's a lot of turbulence. There's a lot of fire. There's a lot of action that's required, but also a lot of reflection. You're beaten up. So look at that. If you think of yourself as the cliffs that are getting beaten up day in and day out by those waves, it's coming at you all the time. And how do you stay centered? How do you stay grounded like those cliffs in the face of the onslaught of everything that's coming to you as a researcher? That to me was the important aspect. So with that, we have about 15 minutes left, and I'd like to spend these 15 minutes in turning it over to you guys to share whatever it is that you want to say. And then we'll end the session for today. So just by a raise of hands, show of hands, who wants to go? and just say whatever has gotten stirred up for you. What are you taking away from today's session, and how do you see it applying to your own research? Okay, Amog?
Professor, my question is again same as related to Deepak's question earlier.
Yeah.
So, in a phenomenological study,
Yeah.
what is the role of a literature review? Do we have anything called as a literature review? Does it have any role to play?
Beautiful question. Who else? Who was the partner in crime with you?
Deepak.
Deepak. Okay. Did you conspire against me?
No, not at all.
Man, I'll tell you. I was waiting for that question with bated breath. So what is the point of a freaking literature review when we are saying it's all pre-theoretical? You don't bring in any, you bracket everything. You don't bring in any phenomena. You're not bringing anything into it. You're like a clean slate. Have you heard the expression tabula rasa? Okay. Clean slate, right?
Yeah, I think grounded theory also has some kind of a similar approach.
Well, grounded theory is different. It's a different animal than phenomenology. So does anybody, this is a powerful question. So what is the role of the literature review? Why even have chapter 2? Why not jump to chapter? Actually, I did a workshop. My very first workshop that I did during my last visit to India was at Amity Institute of Behavioral Health and Allied Sciences in Noida. And the director said to me, hey, what's the point of the literature review? Okay. So Narayan, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think the point of the literature review would be to clarify these points about phenomenology and what phenomenology is all about.
Yes,
so you kind of have to know what the method allows and does not allow. So you have to know what maybe Husserl is saying. You have to know what Max Warren is saying. And you can't do that without a literature review. I mean,
yes.
You don't have to call it that, I guess. But
yeah. Anybody else? It's a very, very central, pivotal quandary question that comes up in phenomenological inquiry all the time. What is the point of a literature review? Why not do something like grounded theory? Okay. Allow, not even have a bibliography. Let the bibliography emerge after the studies are done. So what is the point of having that? Anybody? Take a stab at it. Just think about the various processes that you go through when you do a research study. Okay, go ahead, Garima. Go ahead.
So this is, I'm just speculating that maybe the review of literature exposes you to how that particular experience that you want to study has been looked at by others, and how you want to structure your interview questions, maybe so that you can carry it forward. I mean, just a guess.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll tell you why. Because in phenomenology, you're not standing on an island as the only inhabitant of the island there. There are conversations happening around your phenomena in the wider academic community. There are dots connecting. Who else is talking about your phenomena, even not directly, but tangentially? Okay? So while I was doing negative capability, I brought in Zen Buddhism. Okay? I brought in levels of abstraction. I brought in poetry from John Keats, of course, because that's where it originated in. I brought in entanglements. I brought in so many other literature. I brought in Baxter and Montgomery's dialectical tension, because isn't negative capability a form of dialectical tension, my friends? To stay conflicted between doing and not doing. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what Garima just said was a brilliant thing, that you want to know what other conversations are happening in the academy around your phenomena. They're not, IIM-Bangalore or IIM-Ahmedabad is just not going to give you that degree and say, go, have fun. You have to demonstrate to them that as a scholar, you know what other conversations are happening in the academy. Brilliant piece. I want to applaud you for stretching your mind to think about that. And and I'm going to go in it, but let me just share I think I'm just going to go with Tanvi. Tanvi was wanting to say something. Go ahead, Tanvi.
Yeah, no, actually, it was similar to your point that basically, although it is my question, there are a lot of other people who may have studied that question or can apply it in a different context. So,
Yes.
Literature review will sort of give me an idea of what other people are also thinking, and if I can look at in a different perspective, or at least they have looked at it from different perspective. And I had read parts of your dissertation where I had seen the Zen part of negative capability as well.
Yes. So you did some reading there, and you're very right. Because remember, phenomenology is a perspectival approach. You're looking at multiplicity. You're looking at your aneka antavada, pluralism. You're not just singularly standing on an island and saying, I'm the researcher only. I'm only going to be studying this phenomenon, nobody else. So the literature review, as you're doing the analysis, and I'll talk about this tomorrow when we have the segment on the turnkey process, your literature review starts to speak to the reader as you do the analysis. Now, here's another paradox. When you're doing the analysis, you are not drawing from theory to make the interpretations, my friends. Okay? So in your data analysis, you're not doing that. In the summary, when you write a group narrative, in your summary about talking about divergences, convergences, I believe I've written it in chapter 4. I forget. It's I'm already losing my mind because of the time it's taken. But you refer to some literature, okay, but not in the classic sense that you cite literature. You only cite literature to show that parallels existed between what you discovered and what you found. So in your analysis, you don't say citing Baxter and Montgomery and this and that, but when you do the group narrative, the collective group narrative, that's when you can take it. And just remember one other thing, in your abstract, never make any citations. And your abstract phenomenologically should not be more than 200 to 210 words long. That's it. If you're not able to say what you want to say in 200 words, there's something wrong. Okay? So just remember that aspect. But anybody, I know somebody else put up their hand before we say goodbye today. Whose hand was up? Oh, Amog. I'm so sorry, Amog. Go ahead.
Nothing. I just wanted to add that maybe when we saw the previous Gestalt figure, the white background and the goblet, so maybe the literature review plays the role of that white background so that our study stands out in that background.
Aha. So a thought that comes to my mind is that you first start with that white background with nothing in it. And then allow things to emerge. But of course, I could sound like a grounded theorist or do someone doing grounded theory, but really speaking, you don't, even though you have a literature, you've done a literature review, you've looked for the dots connecting in the academia, where are the other conversations happening? You don't bring that into the data collection or the data analysis part. You only start to bring that theory, because you cannot totally divest yourself from theory, but not to make your theory is not to make the interpretation. Your theory is to share the findings and do a narrative there. Mm-hmm. Because reader is interested. Reader is also interested. Hey, I'm not just interested with Andrew doing it or Amog doing it. Yeah, okay, Amog's a great guy. IIM-Ahmedabad or whatnot. But really, I also want to know, does Amog know what are the other conversations happening in this field? And more importantly, how is he connecting the dots with his own phenomenological research? with the conversations that are happening out there.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So with 5 more minutes to go, we can take one last question or two. Anybody else? It's a very important concept, I'll tell you. The literature review, it's going to come at you, so because somebody's going to ask you, and usually it'll be someone who's from the institute that say, well, wait a second, you know, you say phenomenology is all theoretical, but why are you putting a literature review? Why have the literature review to begin with? So you should be equipped. And if you're going to be doing phenomenology, as I think some of you are going to be doing this, make sure that you have these foundations worked out. Go ahead, Garima.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that what role does review of literature plays in structuring our questions for the interview? So,
Wait a minute. Let's not go too fast.
Okay.
The literature review, my dear, has nothing to do with structuring the research. It's called the interview schedule. The interview schedule questions are also not theoretical. Okay?
Yeah.
They're asked as though you're having a conversation. Now, they're designed to have a certain format because they're in-depth interview questions.
Yeah.
And with every question, there's a probe. So if a person says this, how, because you have to elicit some rich data for your study, and you have to, because it's a steering off course that you can bring them forward. So no, the literature, the questionnaire doesn't have, it's not a questionnaire, but it's a interview schedule. And by the way, phenomenology may also be done through questionnaires, but questionnaires are sent out in a very different way. They're not in the same way as a positivist study. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right. With that, I think we're on the dot of just a few minutes left. Anybody else wants to go, or shall we call it a day or night? Is that it? Okay. With that, I want to thank you all for being very patient and very communicative and interactive. I thoroughly enjoyed myself and learned a lot, which I do each time I do these workshops. And 2 hours is a very long time to stay embedded in the learning forum. So I really appreciate the time that it's morning for me here. It's about a little shy of 12 o'clock in the afternoon, but for you guys, it's late. So I want to thank you, for all of you, for being here and taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us. Tomorrow, same time, and we'll get into the turnkey process. We'll also do an in-depth examination of typical questions. If you want to send me your research questions, or just one question, if you have, feel free. We can talk about it tomorrow if we have time. All right? So thanks again, and good night. Okay? Take care.